What's an oddly violent fact that you know? Suicide bombers can often be identified because the blast pressure of a torso-mounted suicide vest separates the head at the weak point, neck junction. So heads tend to pop off and land nearby relatively intact like a T-ball. Bedbugs don't have vaginas. The male stabs the female in the abdomen with a barb-like penile structure and ejaculates inside the open wound. Death by infection, for the female, is a common outcome. If you have a tooth knocked fully out, root and all, it can go back and live on like nothing ever happened if you get it back into the socket within 45 minutes. After that, the ligament that attaches the tooth to the jaw dies, and while you can put tooth back in, and it will stay there, your body will recognize it as foreign material and resorb it over time. Pro tip 1. Don't put the tooth on ice. Instead, put it in a cup of milk or carry it in your cheek. Pro tip 2. Don't go to the hospital. A knocked out tooth isn't an emergency, and you will wait much longer than 45 minutes to be looked at. Go to the closest dentist. It will be their biggest emergency of the year, possibly of all time. A human arm only supplies about 1,800 calories, while a leg has about 7,150 calories. The Paraguayan War, by some estimates, killed over half the population and 80% of all military-aged males in Paraguay. Boiler explosions, like a steam train or ship, may look like quick and painless, but in reality they are slow and painful, as you literally get cooked alive by steam. When Flight 93 crashed, the body parts and personal effects of the passengers were scattered into the nearby woods. Tree climbers had to retrieve as much as they could from the treetops. The human brain has no pain receptors. A parasite could be eating you from the inside, and you wouldn't know. When we have to submit animals for rabies testing, we have to cut their head off, and make sure we get some of the brainstem too, and send it via FedEx, UPS to a lab. If you drain the iron out of the blood of approximately 352 people, you would have enough iron to make a stable iron longsword. Most gunfights are within 7 feet, and people still miss most of the shots they take. Edit. Holy 2. 9K updates Batman. Thanks for the love, y'all. 9/11 happened when I was in college. A guy the first had a class with's girlfriend was a rescue dog handler. She went out to assist in the rescue, and came back with PTSD because the dogs would come out of the ruins covered in human blood. Just covered. That possibility had never occurred to me. Genghis Khan's forces killed so many people they lowered the world's carbon levels. The Dachau concentration camp was located near Munich. While not an extermination camp in the proper sense, it still had a crematorium due to the high number of inmate deaths. And oftentimes ash of the burning bodies would snow on the residents and in the streets of Munich. Officials passed it off as local wildfires, and the people believed it. The chainsaw was invented for childbirth. I like to post this when I get the chance in threads like this. Male llamas and alpacas have some very sharp lower incisors, sometimes called fighting teeth. Why are they called fighting teeth? When fighting for dominance of a herd, which is a savage display in and of itself, a male will use those teeth to castrate other males, ensuring they can't mate with the females of the herd. Farmers and breeders will file these teeth down, usually during shearing. Cannibalism may lead to a disease called kuru, which has no cure. It's a prion disease, and it's always fatal. It's typically acquired after eating the brain. There was an increase of this disease at one point in Papua New Guinea, as there was a practice that involved consuming the brains of deceased relatives performed by the four people. Owls and crows hate each other. It's in their DNA. Gang wars. Feeding your baby 1 tablespoon of salt will kill it. A starving pet in a house with your dead body will start with your lips, nose, eyes and ears. Sleep well. Edit. Damn, this got big. Seems we all can agree, much as we love cats, if you sleep in by 15 minutes, they're thinking about it anyways. Also, I am firmly in camp dog. But yes, they will do it also. Just a little later. Many hits on Google. This is but one. Read at your own discretion. If you stab a man in the dead of winter, steam will rise from the wound. The Indians believed that this was the man's soul escaping his body. Most of information about the human body handling extreme temperatures and handling pain. Has come from Nazi concentration camps and Japanese Unit 731. Bears will give oral sex. Human flesh can gum up a chainsaw. Only viable in movies and games. Many people like the internet tip for burying a body, i.e., burying vertically, dead animal over it, etc. But it's way more convenient to burn, melt it because dental records and bone structure provide crucial information to identification. On that same note, there are numerous children still unidentified from the John Wayne Gacy murders. Boiling peanut butter and magic shave with a bit of water makes prison napalm hard to wipe off, and even if you live, it'll be heavily disfigured. Learned that in another askReddit. Exposed human intestines, intestinal avulsion, secondary to traumatic evisceration, look like loops of bloody sausages. And freshly amputated limbs secondary to blast trauma can resemble bloody hamburger meat packed around shattered bone with shredded crepe paper hanging around it. Addendum to second fact: when placing a tourniquet on said amputation, sometimes if there's not enough intact tissue left above the site of the injury, the pressure of the tourniquet can just squeeze the pulped flesh out from under the remains of the skin like meat jelly. Source: I'm former combat medic and Iraq war vet. Enjoy the rest of your day. Naval combat is some brutal stuff. Even if most don't tend to think of it that way, they can be just as horrific as land battles, if not more so. I've read about ships that took serious beatings, in this particular instance battleship Bismarck, who took so many close-range battleship and cruiser shells during her final battle that her hull was glowing red-hot in places, where the insides are described as just meat. Just filled with nondescript mixtures of blood, flesh, organs, and shattered bone, with occasionally identifiable body parts or corpses. Maybe you'll recognize part of a crewmate's face here or there. Read about entire decks slick with blood, dismembered and charred bodies strewn everywhere, skin being scalded off or limbs amputated by the steam from damaged boilers depending on the pressure and size of the hull. People just straight up being vaporized by shell hits. Ships are confined spaces. All that kinetic energy, shrapnel, and fire doesn't disperse into the open air, so you can get some real nasty scenes. Some ships that manage to survive heavy beatings would never be able to have the smell of burning and decaying flesh fully washed out of them. The number of British soldiers lost to mud alone in the Battle of Passchendaele is thought to be numbered in the thousands. Bamboo in the right conditions can be used as torture. It can grow 4 centimeters inches a day, growing right through the captive. There is some controversy about whether anyone did this, but Mythbusters confirmed it was viable. I just always thought it would be the worst way to die. It takes 3 full turns to rip a head off because the elasticity of the skin. If a dog lunges to attack and you are able to feed him your weak forearm, you have access with your strong hand to crush his esophagus. He will die. Things you learn in veterinary school. It takes apt 7 to 8 pounds of force to rip off the human ear. You can do it, but pain won't let you. The animal with the strongest punch in the world is the mantis shrimp. They have a club appendage that can deliver blows up to 60 miles per hour. Your immune system doesn't know your eyes exist, so if it ever found out, it would think your eyes are an outside force and would destroy them. A decapitated human head weighs about as much as a bowling ball. When someone is flayed alive, they often die of hypothermia, blood loss, or shock hours to days after being flayed. You really do see something leave when then die. You can 100% see life leave someone's eyes. And it's fucking terrifying. If you have a catastrophic malfunction in a bolt-action rifle, the bolt will jettison backwards and impale you wherever is immediately behind it. When a pathologist does an autopsy, they need to take out your organs to take samples. First they open your chest and then your abdomen. Once you're open, they snip the aorta and esophagus. Then while holding onto those, they sort of lift it up and snip down the connections of the spine. Then the last bowel at the bottom is snipped. The organs all hang out together in a big blob. And those just get plopped onto a metal table in a big mess. The pathologist then sorts through your organs and chops up pieces. Next, after that's all done, they basically just dump all your organs into a bag and just sorta toss that bag into your empty husk. Then they use a big ass thread and needle and sew you back up with that bag of organs inside you. Oh, and while this is all happening, a different person is sawing your skull to get to that sweet, sweet gooey brain. Oh, and one more thing. The first step of the autopsies I saw was to take a needle and suck out the eye juices. They do toxicology testing on that. The Chinchorro people of Peru and northern Chile, 5000 BCE, had the oldest mummification practice wherein they'd remove all flesh and organs from the deceased and wrap them in clothes. Since they're buried in the Atacama Desert, driest desert on Earth, they're well preserved. Until now, BC climate change is slightly humidifying the desert caused bone rot and mold. King Leopold was responsible for the killings of over 15 million Africans. Only mildly violent. But if you batter the tire of a parked car properly, you can trip the onboard computer into thinking that it has been in a crash and unlock the doors. Polar bears actively hunt humans. Stem to sternum. If you have a knife and someone is attacking you, hold the blade towards them sharp side up. Stab them just above the belt and jerk upwards as hard as you can. Then run. It's pretty hard to chase after someone while you're holding your intestines in. Lingqi. Translated variously as the slow process, the lingering death, or slow slicing, and also known as death by 1,000 cuts, was a form of torture and execution used in China from roughly 900 CE up until the practice ended around the early 1900s. It was also used in Vietnam and Korea. In this form of execution, a knife was used to methodically remove portions of the body over an extended period of time, eventually resulting in death. Documentary and link. When the Romans were about to lose a battle, they put their sword on the ground, blade up, and belly flopped on it, skewering them. They did this because they would rather submit to death than to the enemy. Pigs can, and will eat every bit of the human body, except for the ears and teeth. After finding that out, I don't think I will ever go near a pig IRL. I hate that I read every single comment. Time to begin therapy. You can crack a skull open easier with a bottle than you can break a bottle over someone's head. Injecting insulin under the tongue is the perfect murder way. It can't be traced, and by the time anyone comes, it wouldn't be left to find. If anyone legal is reading this, I swear I am not a murderer, I am just on TikTok. There is roughly 40 mouthfuls of blood in the human body. It is possible to drive a middle finger through someone's eye socket with sufficient force to penetrate the very thin layer of bone behind the eye and do immense, quite possibly lethal, amounts of brain damage. Google Unit 731. It's actually disturbing the experiments they did on other humans. Removing organs while still alive and awake. Took babies 3 days old into blistering cold temperature to freeze to death. Put people in pressure chambers until their eyeballs popped out of their skull. Injected several test subjects full of horse blood while being drained from their own blood. Hung upside down until death. Dehydrated to death in a room of hot fans. Spun to death using a centrifuge. Exposed to extremely lethal X-ray doses. Burned and buried alive. Purposeful heroin injection to cause overdosing. There's so much worse. Headlocks are surprisingly easy to put people in and can be much more brutal for the victim than it seems. Martin Sommer, Karl Otto Koch and Ilse Koch were all sadistic torturers at Buchenwald concentration camp. Supposedly, Sommer would hide his victims underneath his bed for the night until he could dispose of them. The Kochs and Sommer were put on trial by no other than Heinrich Himmler for their crimes. John C. Woods was the chief hangman for the Nuremberg trials. He botched numerous hanging as he wasn't a proper hangman. A lot of the hanging resulted in the victim having their head bashed against the opening and not having their neck snapped. Instead, swaying and struggling for air. Rape and murder of adolescent animals is a frequent thing in the animal kingdom. Cats, for example. You would have to hold a pillow over a person's face for at least 4 minutes before you would actually be able to suffocate them. That's why you should play dead if someone tries to smother you with a pillow. More often than not, they'll think the job's done and you can catch them by surprise. Only 20% of males in the Soviet Union born during the first and second decade of the 20th century survived WW2. To get 2,000 daily calories, you could eat nothing but human teeth. A full mouthful set of 32 adult teeth contain about 36 calories. A single tooth takes up, on average, about 5 cc. A single serving size of breakfast cereal is about 1 cup. There are, for the sake of easy math, about 500 teeth in 1 cup, which is about the equivalent of the full sets of teeth from about 6 humans. A single bowlful of human teeth would be about 560 calories, which means to hit 2,000 calories a day, you'd need to eat about 3-1/2 bowls of human teeth. Approximately the full sets of teeth from 55 adult humans every day. Now, consider that unless you're being very selective with these teeth and only eating teeth that are compromised, you face damaging your own teeth when chewing every spoonful of every bowl of human teeth each day. So it would be wise to pulverize these teeth into a powder and add a liquid to make a sort of slurry you could drink. Bone apple teeth. The problem with this is, I know a fair amount about violence against human anatomy that I don't even have a good gauge for what's oddly violent anymore. Does lots of attempted suicides by gun survive count? People who aim up rather than back have a habit of surviving after they blow their faces off. Sometimes they pass a while later, but sometimes they just survive. Except now their upper jaw, nasal passage, eyes are gone. Your dog will starve before it eats your body. A cat will start once it's hungry. During the Japanese occupation of China, they massacred many people. The Japanese wanted to keep a record of how many they'd killed, but they soon realized they didn't have space to keep all the heads, so they cut off the victims' noses. They sent these back to Japan, where they built a shrine out of them, as estimated 30 to 50,000 were used in the shrine. I believe in the 90s, after decades of campaigning by the Chinese, the Japanese were finally going to apologize for this war crime. However, when the Chinese also demanded the body parts be returned to China, Japan then rescinded the apology. The shrine is still there to this day. A torture to death method used by indigenous Americans was to bind, incise, disembowel and treat immediate blood loss and trauma in order to keep the victim alive while their intestines were strewn about the area. If done in the day, I imagine insects and ravens would have the first go. At night, maybe raccoon and skunk. Either way, each peck, scratch and tearing bite would be felt. Dolphins try to rape people, and they wrap seaweed and live eels around their penises and masturbate. People who say to shoot people in the legs instead of anywhere else don't know what they're talking about. Why? Try a few squirty boys in your legs that will make you bleed out insanely fast if punctured. The United States calls itself the land of the free, while incarcerating a larger percentage of its population than any society on Earth. The reason they put a bag type of thing over your head when in an electric chair is so that your eyes won't pop out of your head and drop on the floor. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.